Don't let the devil dictate your day, because the enemy doesn't need to destroy your entire life to defeat you. He only needs to control a single moment, a single thought, a single reaction. One whisper at the wrong time can steal your confidence, poison your attitude, and derail your purpose before you even step out the door. The battle doesn't begin when trouble shows up. It begins the moment you open your eyes. And if you don't claim your day, the enemy will. He will set the tone, plant the thought, trigger the insecurity, and push you into emotional autopilot before you have even had a chance to breathe. That is why you must wake up with authority, not apology. You must step into your day with intention, not passivity. Your day belongs to you. Don't hand it over. The enemy's greatest tactic is not chaos, it is suggestion. He whispers, "You're already behind." He murmurs, "Nothing good is coming today." He hints, "You're not strong enough to handle what's coming." He doesn't need to shout, because he knows that if he gets inside your head, he has already gotten inside your behavior. Your reactions begin to shift. Your confidence begins to drain. Your expectations begin to shrink. If he can shape your mindset, he doesn't have to touch your circumstances. That is why you must guard your mental territory like priceless real estate. The enemy is bold enough to knock, but you don't have to let him in. You don't have to accept every thought that shows up. You are not obligated to host every lie that visits you. When you decide that the devil will not dictate your day, you begin to interrupt the default patterns that drain your strength. You stop waking up and immediately scrolling through negativity. You stop letting tired emotions define your decisions. You stop letting yesterday's wounds write today's script. You start speaking to yourself before anything else speaks to you. You start declaring your identity before your insecurity tries to rewrite it. You start redirecting your language so that your mouth agrees with your destiny instead of with your fear. You don't wait for motivation. You create it with your own voice. There is power in choosing your narrative before life chooses it for you. When you say, "Today I walk in clarity," you silence confusion. When you say, "Today I operate in strength," you weaken fear. When you say, "Today I expect good things," you strip adversity of its power. Your day responds to the authority you use. Heaven listens, hell trembles, and your own mind aligns with the words you speak. But if you remain silent, the enemy will speak for you. He will fill the void with discouragement, exaggeration, frustration, and distraction. He will convince you to shrink when you were meant to rise. The devil counts on your emotional reactions. He counts on you being tired, frustrated, overwhelmed, or insecure. He throws thoughts at you that match your weakest moments. But when you refuse to be mastered by emotion, you reclaim the wheel of your day. You may feel fear, but you will not follow it. You may feel frustration, but you will not bow to it. You may feel doubt, but you will not let it steer you. Emotion can sound loud, but it doesn't have the authority to lead unless you give it permission. Strength is not the absence of feeling. It is the refusal to let feeling become your compass. When a thought challenges your identity, confront it. When a memory tries to shame you, reject it. When insecurity tries to shrink you, call it out. Your identity is not up for negotiation. You are too called, too chosen, too equipped to let the enemy rewrite your perception of yourself. Challenge every lie that contradicts who you were designed to be. The moment you feel a thought lowering your value, interrupt it like an intruder. Your mind is sacred ground. Don't let the enemy plant weeds in the soil where your future is meant to grow. Your language must reflect the direction you are going. Speak in alignment with purpose, not in agreement with fear. Words create momentum. Words create atmosphere. Words create expectation. If you speak weakness, weakness rises. If you speak strength, strength awakens. Redirect your language and you redirect your life. Say what you want to see until what you want to see becomes what you live. Your inner dialogue must be trained, sharpened, disciplined. Don't let your mind wander into dark places unchallenged. Don't let old wounds narrate a new season. Don't let fear be the loudest voice inside your head. Retrain your inner voice to speak with conviction, clarity, and faith. Repeat truth until it becomes instinct. Declare strength until it becomes reflex. Your destiny needs your agreement. Your mind must partner with your purpose.
When you rise each morning, rise with authority, rise with clarity, rise with intentionality. The enemy can only dictate the day you refuse to claim. Guarding the gate of your mind is not a casual suggestion. It is a spiritual discipline, a daily battle, and a sacred responsibility.
Your mind is the control center of your life, the doorway through which purpose flows and decisions are shaped. If the enemy can slip through the gate, he doesn't need to break into your finances, your family, or your opportunities. He will sabotage you from the inside out. The thoughts you permit will become the emotions you feel, the choices you make, and ultimately the destiny you live. This is why you must be vigilant, intentional, and spiritually alert. The greatest warfare you face is not external, it is internal, happening in the silent chambers of your mind where no one sees, but where everything is decided. The mind is like a house with many rooms, but the door has only one lock, and you are the keeper of that key. Every thought is a visitor, and not all visitors are friendly. Some thoughts come to heal, encourage, and elevate. Others come to infect, weaken, and deceive. You do not have to accept every thought that knocks. You are not obligated to open the door just because something is loud or persistent. A thought can't take control of your life unless you grant it access.
That is why discernment is essential. You must know the difference between a thought that is correcting you and one that is condemning you, between a thought that is guiding you and one that is manipulating you. The enemy loves subtlety. He rarely breaks in violently. He whispers, he suggests, he nudges. And if you are not paying attention, you let him in without realizing that he entered carrying chains. Guarding the gate means being aware of what you feed your mind, what you watch, what you listen to, what conversations you engage in. These things are not harmless. They are seeds. And every seed produces after its own kind. You cannot plant negativity and expect peace. You cannot plant fear and expect confidence. Whatever occupies your attention eventually shapes your mentality. When you constantly expose yourself to chaos, you begin to normalize chaos. When you constantly expose yourself to discouragement, your expectation starts shrinking. You begin anticipating loss instead of victory, delay instead of breakthrough, struggle instead of progress. This is why intentional mental diet is crucial. Protect your mind from unhealthy influences the same way you protect your body from harmful toxins. Guarding the gate also means watching what you tell yourself. Sometimes the enemy doesn't need to speak because your own voice is doing the work for him. Self-criticism, self-doubt, and self-sabotage often come from unchallenged inner narratives you've allowed to live inside you. If your inner voice constantly attacks your identity, belittles your worth, or minimizes your potential, it becomes the enemy's loudest megaphone. You must confront those internal lies with truth. Challenge thoughts that diminish you. Confront thoughts that shame you. Silence thoughts that accuse you. Your inner dialogue must be aligned with your purpose, not your past. You are not obligated to rehearse old wounds just because they are familiar. You are allowed to replace them with truth that strengthens your spirit and stabilizes your perspective. The gate of your mind must also be guarded through mindfulness. Some people lose their day because they never pause long enough to examine what they are thinking. They allow thoughts to run wild, unchecked and unfiltered. But a guarded mind is a monitored mind. Take inventory of what is influencing you. Notice when fear tries to hijack your imagination. Notice when worry tries to become your default setting. Notice when insecurity tries to take the driver's seat. Awareness is the first step toward authority. You cannot evict a thought you haven't identified, and you cannot shut the gate on an intruder you refuse to acknowledge is there. Finally, guarding the gate requires the courage to reject what does not belong. It takes boldness to tell a thought, you cannot live here. It takes strength to interrupt a negative mental pattern.
It takes spiritual maturity to choose peace over panic and truth over lies. But when you take responsibility for what enters your mind, you take responsibility for the atmosphere of your life. You become steady, you become clear, you become focused. A guarded mind becomes a fertile ground for wisdom, clarity, and divine direction. Speak to yourself before the enemy speaks to you, because silence is not neutrality. Silence is permission. If you do not fill your mind with truth, strength, and affirmation, the enemy will gladly fill it with lies, fear, and confusion. Your inner dialogue is the first voice your soul hears each day, and it sets the thermostat for your confidence, your decisions, and your emotional stability. Many people wake up and immediately become listeners instead of leaders. Listeners to worry, listeners to anxiety, listeners to yesterday's failures. But when you begin your day speaking life into yourself, you take back the authority over the narrative unfolding in your mind. Your words prepare the atmosphere before the enemy has a chance to pollute it. Your inner voice is not just commentary, it is construction. Every sentence you speak to yourself becomes a building block for your mindset. When you tell yourself, I'm not ready, you build walls of hesitation. When you tell yourself, things never work out for me, you build barriers of defeat. But when you wake up with intentional declarations, I am equipped, I am favored, I am capable, you build a foundation strong enough to withstand the storms that show up uninvited.
The enemy doesn't fear your noise. He fears your clarity. He fears your confidence. He fears a believer who knows how to talk themselves into alignment with their purpose.
When you speak truth over yourself, you disarm the enemy before he even launches the attack. Speaking to yourself is not about hype. It is about leadership. You must lead your thoughts the way a shepherd leads a flock. If you let them wander, they will drift into valleys of doubt and cliffs of fear. But if you guide them with deliberate, faith-filled language, they will follow your direction into strength and stability. Too often, people assume their emotions should speak first, and they simply react. But emotions are followers, not leaders. They respond to the tone you set. If you speak chaos, you will feel chaos. If you speak calm, you will feel calm. If you speak possibility, you will begin to notice doors where you previously saw dead ends. Your words train your emotions. Your emotions do not have the authority to train your words. You must speak to yourself because the enemy uses timing. He waits for the vulnerable moment before coffee, before prayer, before clarity, and then slips in with suggestions like you're already behind, or you're not strong enough to handle today, or nothing will change. But your voice gets there first. You block his influence. You set the tone before he sets the trap. The enemy cannot plant seeds in soil that is already occupied. When your heart is filled with affirmations of truth, his lies have no space to take root. Your inner dialogue becomes a shield. You may not control every thought that passes through your mind, but you do control the thoughts you nurture. When you declare strength over yourself, fear loses its grip. When you affirm your worth, insecurity's voice becomes faint. When you remind yourself of your identity and purpose, confusion loses its authority. Speaking to yourself is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of maturity. It means you understand that no one has more access to your mind than you do. If you don't use that access intentionally, the enemy will use it aggressively. Speaking to yourself also activates your memory. When you open your mouth and declare what you know to be true, you remind your soul of victories it has forgotten. You remind your spirit of battles you survived. You remind your heart of strength you didn't know you still possessed. Sometimes the greatest encouragement you will ever receive will come from your own lips. No one knows the details of your journey like you do, so no one can speak to your inner battles like you can. Your voice carries authority because it is the voice your soul has learned to trust since childhood. When you speak to yourself, you break the cycle of mental passivity. You refuse to let the day dictate your mindset. You refuse to let circumstances narrate your identity. You refuse to let fear become your first language. Instead, you choose intentionality. You choose alignment. You choose purpose. Your voice becomes the compass guiding your mind back to truth every time it drifts. Don't allow emotion to become your master, because emotions were designed to be indicators, not dictators. They are like the dashboard lights in a car, signals that something needs attention, but they were never meant to grab the steering wheel and drive your entire life. When emotions take control, they distort perception, magnify problems, and shrink possibilities. They make small issues feel catastrophic and temporary feelings seem permanent. If you allow emotion to lead, it will govern your decisions based on the instability of the moment rather than the wisdom of your purpose. Emotion reacts, but purpose responds. Emotion flares, but truth endures. You cannot build a stable life on unstable feelings, no matter how loud they become. Emotions are real, but they are not reliable leaders. You can feel discouraged and still be destined for greatness. You can feel overwhelmed and still be capable of victory. You can feel afraid and still be standing in the middle of a divine assignment. Feelings do not determine truth. They only reveal where your heart is struggling to align with what you know. The danger comes when you start treating temporary waves of emotion as if they are the full landscape of your life. When emotion becomes your master, it becomes easy to make permanent decisions based on fleeting sensations. You quit jobs you were called to grow in. You walk away from relationships that were meant to sharpen you. You abandon dreams you were designed to pursue, not because the assignment changed, but because your feelings shifted. You must learn to observe your emotions without worshiping them. You can say, I feel afraid, without concluding, therefore I am incapable. You can say, I feel anger, without giving yourself permission to respond destructively. You can say, I feel discouraged, without surrendering to defeat. Mastery is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to interpret emotion through the lens of truth, rather than letting emotion interpret truth for you. When you let emotions define reality, they exaggerate the problem and minimize your strength. But when you define emotions through clarity and wisdom, they become tools rather than tyrants. Emotions become dangerous masters when you don't pause long enough to question them. Feelings come fast, they rise suddenly, but wisdom comes from slowing down long enough to ask, is this emotion telling me the truth, or is it responding to fear, fatigue, memory, or insecurity? Many emotional reactions have nothing to do with the present moment. Some are echoes of old wounds, old disappointments, old betrayals. These emotional flashbacks can convince you that you are in danger even when you are safe. Alone, even when you are supported, incapable, even when you are fully equipped. If you allow these triggered emotions to guide your decisions, you trap yourself inside a story that is no longer yours. Emotional mastery requires learning to separate what you feel right now from what is actually happening right now. When emotion becomes your master, you become reactive instead of proactive. You respond to life instead of directing it. You let circumstances dictate your mood, the behavior of others control your peace, and unexpected challenges shape your identity. But when you reclaim authority over your emotional life, you stop handing out that level of power. You stop giving people the ability to ruin your day. You stop giving circumstances the ability to rewrite your purpose. You stop giving fear the ability to silence your ambition. You begin to live from a place of internal stability that doesn't crumble every time life shifts around you. Emotions are meant to be processed, not obeyed. When sadness comes, acknowledge it, understand it, but don't let it define you. When anger flares, identify its root, but don't let it drive your actions. When fear rises, confront it, but don't let it cage your potential. Emotional maturity means learning to sit with your feelings without surrendering to them. It means creating enough space between stimulus and response to choose wisely instead of reacting impulsively. People who are ruled by emotion often regret their decisions. People who master their emotions often build lives rooted in vision, clarity, and intentionality. You are at your strongest when your emotions serve you instead of sabotage you. When you use emotion as information rather than instruction, you gain insight into your inner world without letting it dominate your outer world. You gain the ability to stay steady in turbulence, focused in uncertainty, and purposeful in chaos. Emotional mastery does not mean you feel less. It means you understand more. It means you know that your feelings are valid, but they are not sovereign. Challenge every thought that challenges your identity, because the battlefield of the mind is where the enemy tries hardest to rewrite the script of who you are. Identity is the foundation of your confidence, your decisions, and your destiny. If that foundation cracks, everything built on it begins to wobble. Thoughts that attack your identity do not come softly, they come strategically, aiming at the very places where you feel uncertain, unqualified, or unworthy. They are designed to make you question your value, doubt your purpose, and underestimate your strength. These thoughts are not mere mental noise, they are intruders. And intruders must be confronted, not entertained. You cannot afford to let any thought roam freely in your mind without examination. Thoughts are powerful. They can either anchor you in truth or imprison you in lies. When a thought rises up saying you're not good enough, you cannot just accept it because it sounds familiar. Familiar does not mean true. When a thought says you'll never change, you cannot allow it to speak as if it knows your future. When a thought whispers everyone is better than you cannot surrender to it simply because it echoes old wounds. Every thought that contradicts your identity must be interrogated, confronted, and replaced. If you do not challenge it, it will challenge you until it conquers you. Your identity is not formed by your failures, your upbringing, or the opinions of others. Yet these are often the sources of the thoughts that try to define you. A childhood criticism can follow you into adulthood, shaping silent insecurities you never question. A past mistake can replay in your mind as if it is your permanent label. A moment of weakness can masquerade as your entire character. Thoughts rooted in shame, regret, or comparison are some of the most deceptive because they feel justified. They feel earned. They feel accurate. But truth is not based on feeling. Truth is based on who you are becoming, not on who you used to be. This is why it is essential to identify the origin of a thought. Ask yourself, does this thought reflect my potential or does it reflect my pain? When you challenge thoughts that challenge your identity, you reclaim authority over your internal narrative. You stop allowing insecurity to write your story. You stop allowing fear to determine your boundaries. You stop allowing self-doubt to define your qualifications. Instead, you become the gatekeeper of your mental territory. You learn to recognize when a thought tries to shrink your sense of self and push back with clarity. When a thought says you're too broken, you reply with, I am healing. When a thought says you're too late, you answer with, my timing is still unfolding. When a thought says you're not capable, you affirm, I am growing stronger every day. This is not denial, it is correction. It is replacing distortion with truth. Challenging destructive thoughts requires mental discipline. It is easier to believe the lie than to fight for the truth. Lies don't need evidence, they feed off emotion. Truth requires intention. Lies appeal to your wounds. Truth appeals to your purpose. Lies show up uninvited. Truth must be chosen repeatedly. That choice is the essence of mental resilience. You must become intolerant of thoughts that diminish your identity. The moment you hear a thought that belittles your worth, you confront it. The moment you sense a thought that tries to shame your story, you challenge it. The moment you notice a thought that tells you to hide, shrink, or silence yourself, you expose it for what it is, a threat to your destiny. Many people lose battles they could have won simply because they never examined the thoughts guiding their actions. They assume the thought is true because it feels strong, but the strength of a thought does not determine its accuracy. Repetition does. A lie repeated in your mind often enough begins to sound like truth. That is why you must interrupt the cycle. You must refuse to meditate on mental messages that undermine your identity. You must stop rehearsing narratives that weaken your confidence. The more you challenge these thoughts, the weaker their grip becomes. The more you replace them with truth, the stronger your identity becomes. When you consistently confront thoughts that attack your identity, you develop an inner stability that circumstances cannot shake. You stop interpreting yourself through the lens of fear, comparison, or past mistakes. Instead, you begin to view yourself through the lens of growth, resilience, and potential. Thoughts that once intimidated you lose their power. Thoughts that once discouraged you lose their influence. Thoughts that once controlled you lose their authority. You step into a version of yourself that is grounded, clear, and confident. Redirect your language to realign your life, because your words are not casual expressions. They are instruments that shape the atmosphere around you and the environment within you. Every phrase you speak carries direction. Your language can point you toward possibility or trap you in limitation. Many people are living in the echo of their own speech, walking in the very outcomes they once declared, without realizing the power behind their words. What you say consistently becomes what you expect, and what you expect becomes what you pursue. Language is not merely communication, it is creation. It frames your mindset, influences your decisions, and guides your behavior long before you recognize its impact. Your life will always follow the direction of your words. If you speak defeat long enough, you begin to move like someone defeated. If you speak fear long enough, you begin to live as if danger is always near. If you speak negativity long enough, you begin to see the world through a darkened lens. But when you shift your language, you shift your internal compass. You begin to reposition your life toward clarity, strength, and growth. Saying I can't close his doors before you ever knock. Saying I'll try weakens your commitment. Saying it's impossible blinds you to solutions. But when you declare I will, I can learn, I am growing, you create mental pathways that support action instead of avoidance. Redirecting your language requires paying close attention to the phrases you speak unconsciously. Most destructive speech is not intentional, it is habitual. People repeat phrases inherited from parents, culture, or past experiences without realizing these words are shaping their emotional and mental patterns. A person who constantly says, "That's just my luck," unknowingly trains their mind to expect disappointment. Someone who regularly says, "Nothing ever works out for me," reinforces a narrative of failure. Words become cycles, and cycles become identity. Breaking these cycles begins with awareness. You must listen to yourself and ask, is the way I speak supporting the life I want or sabotaging it? Your language must match your destiny, not your discomfort. It is easy to speak negatively when facing setbacks, but difficulty does not excuse destructive speech. Speaking in alignment with your purpose means choosing words that reflect where you are headed, not where you are stuck. Even when life feels heavy, you have the authority to choose the tone of your language. You can say, "I am overwhelmed," or you can say, "I am managing one moment at a time." You can say, "I always fail," or you can say, "I am learning from this experience." The situation may be the same, but the language shifts your mindset and eventually your outcome. Words are the bridge between your present and your promise. Redirecting your language also means eliminating exaggerations that inflate negativity. Many people speak in absolutes: always, never, nothing, no one. which magnify problems and minimize solutions. When you say, I never get opportunities, you blind yourself to the opportunities that do exist. When you say, everyone is against me, you close your heart to allies who could support you. When you say, nothing ever improves, you lose the motivation to pursue progress. Emotional exaggeration may feel accurate in the moment, but it distorts reality and reinforces hopelessness. Replace exaggeration with clarity. Replace emotional language with intentional language. Replace reactive speech with reflective speech. The direction of your language is closely tied to the direction of your thoughts. If you think small, you will speak small. If you think defeated, you will speak defeated. But the beauty of language is that it can interrupt thought patterns. Speaking truth out loud can silence mental lies. Speaking hope can weaken despair. Speaking strength can challenge insecurity. You can use your language to correct your thoughts, redirect your emotions, and reinforce your identity. Your mouth can become your strongest tool of alignment when used intentionally. Your language must also be future focused. Instead of speaking from the frustration of your current circumstance, speak from the expectation of your future reality. You may not feel strong, but you can speak strength. You may not see progress, but you can speak direction. You may not feel confident, but you can speak courage. Speaking this way does not deny reality, it defines it. You are shaping the environment you will eventually step into. Your words become the pathway toward the life you are building, even when the evidence is not visible yet. Redirection requires consistency. You cannot speak intentionally once and expect transformation. You must commit to a daily discipline of language that supports your growth. Catch the negative phrases, replace them immediately. Don't let destructive sentences linger in your mouth. Don't let self-sabotage form on your tongue. Your language must agree with your evolution. Your speech must reflect the strength you are cultivating. Your words must match the life you are becoming capable of living. Train your inner dialogue to agree with your destiny, because the voice inside you is the narrator of your life. And if that narrator is misinformed, insecure, or conflicted, your entire story will read differently than what was intended for you. Destiny is not just a future outcome, it is a direction, a pull, an inner knowing of who you are meant to become. But your inner dialogue is the interpreter of that destiny. If the interpreter is negative, fearful, or limited, then even the greatest potential can be misread. People often underestimate how much their inner voice shapes their confidence, their decisions, their expectations, and their resilience. You cannot walk boldly into a future that your inner dialogue keeps talking you out of. You cannot rise to your calling while your own thoughts keep dragging you back to your comfort zone. The destiny is real, but your inner dialogue must learn to agree with it. Inner dialogue is the most constant conversation you will ever have. It is the soundtrack playing beneath every action, every risk, every hesitation. It is the voice that either tells you you were created for this, or the voice that whispers you're not ready. You cannot silence it completely, but you can train it. Just as an athlete trains their body and a musician trains their ear, you must train your inner voice to recognize truth, reject distortion, and reinforce the path that aligns with your purpose. Training means repetition, intention, and correction. You don't transform your inner dialogue by hoping it improves. You shape it through conscious mental discipline. You must teach it what to say about you, what to believe about you, and what to amplify within you. Untrained inner dialogue is often shaped by emotion, fear, and past experiences. It reacts instead of leading. It interprets possibilities through the lens of old failures. It echoes voices of criticism long after those critics have disappeared from your life. It replays memories of embarrassment and makes them seem like predictions of future outcomes. That's why you must confront these default patterns. When your inner voice begins to speak from the wounds of your past instead of the wisdom of your destiny, you must interrupt it. When it begins to predict failure based on old mistakes, you must correct it. When it begins to shrink your potential because of temporary doubt, you must retrain it. Training your inner dialogue is the process of teaching your mind to support your destiny instead of sabotaging it. Destiny requires agreement. You cannot step into greatness while thinking in weakness. You cannot take bold steps while rehearsing insecure conversations in your mind. You cannot lead others while your inner voice constantly undermines your ability to lead yourself. Your inner dialogue must rise to the level of where you are going, not where you have been. Begin speaking to yourself as someone who is becoming, not someone who is breaking. Speak from the place of your potential, not the place of your fear. Remind yourself of your strengths, your growth, and your resilience. Train your mind to amplify progress instead of highlighting every flaw. One of the most powerful shifts in training your inner dialogue is learning to replace self-criticism with self-coaching. Instead of saying, I always mess things up, say, I am learning what I need to improve. Instead of telling yourself, I'm not good enough, speak, I am growing into the person I need to be. Self-coaching does not ignore weakness. It redirects it. It acknowledges where you are while guiding you toward where you are going. It transforms mistakes into lessons and setbacks into stepping stones. This kind of internal language builds momentum rather than shame. It keeps you focused on your progress instead of your limitations. Another essential part of training your inner dialogue is consistency. A single empowering thought will not override years of internal negativity. You must repeat the truth until your mind accepts it as the new standard. You must correct lies the moment they appear. You must practice speaking from your future until your present begins to shift. Consistency rewires mental patterns. Repetition creates familiarity. Over time, your inner voice begins to instinctively support your destiny rather than fight it. Instead of defaulting to fear, it defaults to faith. Instead of assuming failure, it anticipates growth. Instead of reinforcing insecurity, it strengthens identity. When your inner dialogue aligns with your destiny, you become centered, focused, and unstoppable. You stop negotiating with doubt. You stop surrendering to fear. You stop arguing with your own potential. Your inner voice becomes your ally, your coach, your compass. It begins to guide you instead of confuse you. It begins to protect you instead of paralyze you. It begins to push you forward instead of pulling you back.